I think P.F. Chang's may be overrated.
I just heard somebody say that. Yeah, actually, on Thursday, I think.
Yeah, I think it's just like salt. They said, okay, we've got a lot of salt. What can we do with this? Yeah. Yeah. All right. Should we do our podcast?
We should. Yeah, I got a lot to say about this.
Do you?
I have some venting to say about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not a grande.
So, right, I've got some talling, some granding, some venting. All right. Well, as you know, this is the Measure of an Episode, where it is our continuing mission to explore what makes Star Trek proper Star Trek and not just keeping children out of the loop. I'm Jonathan.
Not just 3/4 of potentially a good episode. And I'm Paul. And the criteria by which we judge these episodes. Number 1, is there science fiction explored in the plot? Number 2, is that science fiction unique or novel in some way? Number 3, is there a moral or ethical dilemma? I'm Paul.
And I'm Jonathan, and I genuinely thought you were going to say I'm Jonathan, and I'm not sure why. This week we watched Let's Sleeping Borg Lie, which was episode 12 of season 8 of Star Trek Voyager. After an 8-month, almost 9-month gap between episode 10 and 11, we're continuing the series again with 10 more episodes. And the blurb states, when the crew encounters a dormant Borg cube, Zero risks everything to save their ship. It kind of sounds
nobody,
right? It kind of sounds like a bad English translate, and they meant to put nobody.
I was pretty excited. I was excited to see their interpretation of the Borg.
Sure,
which was interesting because this is for kids and pretty scary. I would say I don't really know what the demographic is, like how old you're supposed to be when you watch the show.
Right.
It's got to be 12 and below, I'm assuming.
Somewhere between, 8 and 12, yeah. I would imagine it's not intended for 5 and 6-year-olds to get wrapped up into the stories just because it doesn't play light enough.
Yeah, it's hard for me to tell because a lot of this is thematic in a way that is for kids, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of to be told by the idea that the way that they defeated the Borg was through love.
Right. Through their own collective.
Yeah, which hasn't worked before in the past.
Right.
That was unique. That was a unique way to try and defeat the Borg.
But to be fair, it was also a unique entity that did it. It was a cloud that they were wrapping up in Borg tentacles. It wasn't someone that they had full on nanobit converted.
Yeah, it was interesting that also they set up that this person was in a collective before, and she was the most suited to be able to defeat a collective.
Right.
And they did a good job kind of making the Borg's intellect or whatever the Borg consciousness was, because there was no...
The hive mind, yeah.
Physical, yeah, the hive mind. It was kind of cool to see how that worked. And I would have liked to have heard a little bit more about this. Maybe we do know more about this Zero character. We just haven't seen it.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, we're 12 episodes in, and it's a kid's show, so I'm sure that there is more about Zero that we haven't seen.
But it would have been cool to kind of see why she was not as susceptible to the Borg.
Right.
Even though she kind of was and would have stayed that way if she hadn't been talked out of killing. What was she going to do? They've really changed how they assimilate people. Before, it was just these 2 little nanotubes that go into your throat and inject nanites or whatever they're called.
Right.
Now they just hit you with a drill bit.
And literally just hit you with it. Just whack you over the head. You're Borg now. I mean, so one speculation that you could have, although Voyager earlier seasons do kind of throw this out, I'd have to go back and watch them, but it could be that is how children are assimilated, because they do have development that still needs to happen.
So they drill a hole in your neck?
Yeah.
A bigger hole in your neck.
Well, was it in your neck? It looked like it was in his arm. It looked like she was going for the wrist.
I don't know. She was pointing her giant drill at the guy's face.
Oh, all right.
So
all right.
I don't know what the plan was.
Right.
I think that one of them should have been assimilated as an example.
Yes.
And then they lost that character. Actually, I was hoping it was going to be that character. He's my least favorite.
Right. Well, actually, it would have been cool if if they did assimilate him and still pulled him out, and her knowledge of the collective managed to separate him. So we kind of had a 7 of 9 character, but he was even more Borg than 7 of 9. So he actually used his Borg technology for his engineering stuff.
Can we have fewer one-liners from him? Because everything he says is just a one-liner.
Right.
And it's getting a little old.
But this, talking about assimilating this one character or any one character, and they should have done that, is kind of my venting about this episode. Just because if you don't, like, if this is supposed to be an introductory Star Trek show for kids, you don't know who the Borg are. And they do nothing in this episode that is threatening beyond any other typical bad guy, where they grab the kids, they tie them up, and then one of the characters saves them, and
right.
So there wasn't anything in this episode to demonstrate how the Borg were as scary as Janeway was talking about.
I think they did a good job setting up, like, the whole Borg. All of the visuals looked really cool.
Yes. And ominous.
All of the camera angles. Yeah. I mean, they made them feel very scary, but that's coming from somebody who already knows why the Borg are scary, because the Borg are not scary because of how they look, although that helps.
Right.
But the way that they look is not the scary part. The Borg are kind of the Michael Myers in Star Trek, in that they will always come.
They're relentless.
Coming. Yeah. Nothing. Yeah. Relentless. The Terminator, if you will. Nothing can stop them. And that really, in and of itself, as an explanation, isn't scary, because you're like, what do you mean? You just keep running away.
Right. Well, yeah, and even in this episode, it was essentially a haunted house. The angles and everything they're walking by. It's the sleeping wolves or the sleeping monster, which, I mean, I guess literally that's what it was.
It would have been better had this maybe spanned over 2 episodes. I know it's shocking that I said that, but because you needed an episode where they were being chased by the Borg, where they got a good first-person account of what it means to be assimilated, or what it means to be threatened with assimilation.
Yeah.
And then they find out, well, wait a minute, they are as smart as 1,000 races. Maybe we can convince them. And then maybe they reference the Picard episode,
right?
And they put them all to sleep. Or it's Best of Both Worlds, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where they put Data, or Picard tells Data, put them all asleep, and it works. And then this episode happens.
Right. Well, and then I see. Oh, that would have been neat. Yeah, that would have been.
And then we would have had. It would have felt. I mean, especially if you're introducing the Borg to children.
Right. Well,
by the way, why did they bring them to these weird like medical bay beds to assimilate them? What was the plan? It felt like they were abandoning the Borg mythology a little bit. For the sake of the episode, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. And I would 100% agree that that's kind of what they had to do, which is a little bit sad, because they had already assimilated Zero. They said they would come back for her. So they could have easily made this a 2-parter, but in the same way that, like, Lower Decks has 2-parters, where things that happened in previous episodes come back in the next episode. Like, this episode could have been wrapped up completely, except Zero was still on the Borg ship. And she was telling them, like, I know where they're going. And so they used that information to follow them. And that's kind of where the episode ended. So, it doesn't end on a cliffhanger so much. It just ends on an unanswered question.
Yeah. Or maybe they invite a Borg on board.
Yeah.
And there's like a new character for a while.
Right.
Or something like that. It felt very... I was sad. It felt sad that we had one of the coolest races or characters, if you want to call it that, on Star Trek in Prodigy, talking about the Borg, and they kind of did nothing with it. They were more of the MacGuffin villain of the episode.
Right.
It's like, oh, there's this big scary monster race that we have to get through. And it didn't, I don't know, it felt like if you're going to do the Borg, there's so much more depth than that, than just these monsters that come and chase you.
Right.
That are hiding in the closet.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But it would have been nice. But I kind of like that that Janeway is in the show now.
Yeah, like she's kind of one of the crew. Yeah.
Well, I'm also talking about actual Admiral.
Oh,
Janeway.
Admiral Janeway. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this may have been what you mentioned before about kind of the Uncanny Valley thing, but I didn't notice until this episode that the hologram is a younger Janeway. Like even the face structure is different, and I didn't notice that in the last episode. And I don't know if that's what you were talking about or not, but I found that
No,
interesting.
I feel like the animation itself just doesn't look very good. Like I only feel that way for the humans. Everything
Right.
else kind of feels okay,
Mm-hmm.
but it does feel, especially with the Janeway stuff. I don't know if there's like another guy doing the Janeway stuff, and it just looks like a cutscene from a video game.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't not see it now.
Right.
It makes me think like, and it's up to you, player, to get us through, you know?
Yeah.
So, but did you notice
Mm-hmm.
that the Dr. Noam, is that his name?
The Tellarite. Yeah.
The tusks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Alexander does the voice.
Really? No, I did not notice that.
It's kind of funny because you would never know until when you know, and then you hear it, you can't unhear it.
Right. Right. Did you figure it out, or did you look it up?
I saw his name flash in the credits. I'm like, Jason Alexander. What?
Right.
He plays Janeway.
Well, what did it say? Did it say Jason Alexander as whatever, or did you like? Was it at the beginning?
No, he was relegated to the multiple credits on screen. Like he was not, because the only person that gets that is Janeway.
Mm-hmm.
What's her real name?
Kate Mulgrew.
Kate Mulgrew. Yeah, yeah. Apparently, Jason Alexander does not have as much juice as Kate Mulgrew.
Which is interesting because Jason Alexander, I feel like has, well, since Star Trek. So I guess in the last 25 years, he has done a lot more than Kate Mulgrew has.
It's true, but Jason Alexander is an alumnus of Star Trek as well. He was in Voyager
That's true.
in an episode
That's
called
true.
Think Tank.
Nice.
I don't know if that's his only Star Trek, but I do remember him specifically from that particular episode.
Right. Again, is that something you looked up, or like the,
No, I
the
just
name of the
know
episode?
that.
You just remembered that it was
No, I
Think
do.
Tank?
I do just know that. I don't know when it happens, but it always stuck out to me.
Right.
Because the thing with that Jason Alexander is I'm never really able to see past Jason Alexander into the character.
Mm-hmm. I know.
It always just feels like he's doing some, like it's almost like when I see Tom Hanks acting in a movie, I just can't not see Tom Hanks.
Right. It's Jason Alexander is Jason Alexander as whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Precisely.
Yeah.
What else was I going to say about this episode? Up until the moment that Zero was being coaxed out of her assimilation through, if you're in there, Zero, we still love you.
Right.
And please don't drill a hole through our faces.
Yeah.
Up until that moment, I was really on board with this episode.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't feel super childlike.
Right.
Not that I'm trying. I don't want to denigrate that, but
No.
I know it is a kids show.
Right.
But I was on board. I thought that they had the mystery, they had the mission.
Mm-hmm.
The mission was a proper science fiction mission. It's like maybe they can help us decipher whatever this thing is.
Yeah.
And then that scene happened. I was like, well, you lost me.
Right.
Now it's no longer. And then they had this very quickly laid out denouement where they're like, well, we learned this when I was in the collective, and it's this, and this, and that's all we know. And now the Borg is behind us, and now we have to continue forward with the plot line.
Right.
And it just didn't feel, it was a little let down, if you ask me.
Yeah. No. I agree completely. I think the button at the end was interesting when the guy woke up in, now he's with Starfleet.
Did we know he was from the future?
Audiences may have. We did not.
We did not, though. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's funny coming halfway into, not even starting in season 2, coming halfway into season 1 and starting the show there.
Right. Do you remember the WordPress blog Never Seen Lost?
No. Oh, wasn't that where the guy started watching Lost in the last season?
Yes.
And blogged about it? Yeah.
Yes.
I never read it.
Okay.
But you did, didn't you?
Yeah, and it's hilarious. But that's kind of what this feels like. They're talking about stuff. And it's kind of nice, though, because, it is one of those things that I would like to know, but if it's already been presented in a previous episode, don't give me the as you know, or yes, we've already talked about this, it's blah, blah, blah. I'm okay with not being spoon-fed that every single episode and having to watch the previous episodes to find that information.
Yeah, they probably are in between a rock and a hard place in that it is somewhat of a serialized show.
Mm-hmm.
And Although we've been doing fine, right? Like it's not as though we need. I mean, I haven't watched any previous Leons. Have there been any?
No, there haven't been.
this
Well,
show?
and right, and this is it's kind of the Enterprise style, but this is the style of serialized shows that I truly appreciate, where there is an overall story arc that's happening for the characters. You know, like these guys want to get to Starfleet, and now they've learned that they can't do. They want to get to they want to get to Starfleet, and they've just learned that they can't do that, and so now they're trying to figure out like what else they can do with this ship that is still helpful. But in every episode, there is a conflict that starts at the beginning that's resolved at the end, or, you know, through a two-parter or something.
I think with Enterprise, I think it would be somewhat disorienting to just jump in, which we can attest to.
Right.
It is. So I don't know if it works just to jump in at any point, but it seems to be working for us. I'm kind of fine watching it, you know?
Right. And yes, you're going to be confused about some things, but the story that's happening within that episode, you're not going to be like, wait, what's going on? Whereas in Picard, you know, if you watch like episode 7 of either seasons, you are going to be completely lost as to what's happening.
Right. And then you'll think, maybe this gets better if I know what happened before.
And you'll be sorely disappointed if you decide to act on that.
The only reason that it's this bad is there must be information that I'm missing.
Right. But they didn't do that.
But they didn't do that. What is this a proper Star Trek episode?
I kind of want to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, you know, there is the struggle that Zero has, and there, like you said, there is the novel sci-fi kind of inciting action, but there is also the MacGuffin of the futuristic bomb.
They're calling it the human what are they? It's like a construct. What word are they using for it?
Zero reports the weapon. Living construct.
The living construct. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. We don't really know that much about it. That's feeling more like a MacGuffin at this point than anything, because they tried to shoot it, nothing happened. I mean, it's not really interacted with them in any significant way.
Right.
Other than it exists. Now, I mean, I guess it's there. And we had this idea of a machine sort of assimilating itself or connecting itself to the hive mind and speaking with the collective. We'd never seen that before. I don't think Data has even ever done that before.
Right.
Plugged himself in like R2-D2.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's an ethical dilemma, though. What's the dilemma?
Well, I mean, there's a couple little things. Like, they're reluctant to let Zero go in, and Dahl is the only one who's like, yes, she has to. There's the dilemma of leaving her behind, and they kind of argue about that for a moment. And there's the dilemma that Zero faces briefly of, you know, trying to not get sucked into the collective. There were a couple times where she said we, I mean I.
Yeah. I think it would have been better had the group decided that they weren't going to connect Zero into the collective because it's too dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And then against her will, they decide to do that. That feels a little bit more like an actual dilemma. Because I mean, how many dilemmas can you have in a kid's show? That's the problem.
Right, yeah.
That are proper dilemmas and not just
Mm-hmm.
kind of passing.
This is a dilemma in and of itself.
It is. Maybe that's it.
The dilemma is what they put on us.
Yeah. Where the dilemma?
What were we going to say? The problem is?
It could have been a really just good Borg episode.
Yeah.
It was almost that, but they had to do. I feel like they felt compelled to do the thematics, the little kid thematics,
right
at the end.
Well, and yeah, and just you saying that, like, they didn't even have to have another person do it. Like, they could have had her still kind of like facing the Borg, you know, and wrestling, struggling between the enchantment of the collective and the desire to be unique. You know, it's one of the things that I think that Picard was talking about, how like peaceful it was being in the collective, just because, you know, everything is being decided for you.
Yeah, imagine not having to decide what to have for dinner every night.
Well, just imagine not having to decide anything, you know, and not in a way where like kind of you can't, but it's just everyone is making the quote unquote best choice for you, and you're happy with that.
Well, you don't question it.
Right.
Like, I wonder if this idea of being a drone is that you have complete trust, Like, are you sort of in a daze? Are you actually conscious and somehow you've been convinced that everything that you've been told, all of these voices in your head are correct?
Right.
And so you don't have to do anything? Or has it kind of chemically altered you in some way to make you into a drone? I don't know the answer to that.
Right. Well, and I don't know if that's actually been explored.
Okay, explain this to me.
Okay.
I don't understand this whole concept of if you're not a threat to the Borg, they will not do anything. You're sort of benign to them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that because they had this little sequence, which was actually quite done. I kind of forgot that I was watching this show and thought I was just watching another Star Trek show when she's been told by Janeway to put down your sword, just walk. You'll be fine as long as you're not a threat. She kind of walks through and then the drone kind of turns and looks at her. It's kind of creepy and interesting and very tense.
Mm-hmm.
And then the drone, I guess, decides that she's not a threat and continues on her way. And then I don't remember her name. What's that person's name?
Gwen?
Is that her name?
Mm-hmm.
Gwen? She escapes. I don't understand this idea because just because you're not physically or actively punching that doesn't mean that you could be a threat and that you were a threat 10 minutes ago. And so probably will continue to be a threat.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So this idea that you're not actively doing anything, and so that means, probably nothing.
Right. Like threat, non-threat. Threat, non-threat.
Also, not a Borg, so isn't that an instantaneous threat?
Well, it's not even an instantaneous threat. It's you are not one of us and you will be assimilated. So you're right. Like everything, whether or not it's a threat, it should just be absorbed.
Yeah. Or, I mean, I can understand this working if they're not on a Borg cube.
Sure.
Because if the Borg are attacking another ship and you're deemed not a threat, then we're not going to waste time on you. There are other things we have to go do.
Right.
But on a Borg ship where you're just kind of going to lunch, it's like, what are you doing here?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a very valid question / point, which is exactly that. Like, if you were a threat once, why, if you're not being threatening at that moment, are you not considered a threat?
Right. It didn't make sense this was heavily explored, or I guess utilized in First Contact, the movie, where they're kind of going through and they've assimilated the Enterprise and are actively assimilating people. And Picard gives the order, don't worry, if it doesn't perceive you as a threat, they won't do anything. And they're walking through with phasers pointing at them. And I thought, okay, so what exactly is the threshold for being a threat
Right.
at this point?
Yeah. Right. At least in this episode, she put the weapons down, but yeah.
Yeah, and she's just walking down
It's where she decided
to
get her steps in, yeah.
Yeah, so that was not answered.
Right.
Although I guess they would be remiss if they didn't do that little kind of nod, because that's kind of the nod about Borg is if you're not a threat, they won't do anything, which just makes no sense and has never made any sense since they were introduced. So they had to do it. I understand.
Well, yeah, and again, this is the Halloween episode. Like she's walking down the hall where there are scary things, and she just has to be brave as she walks through.
Yeah. Well, to me, not a Star Trek episode.
That's fine.
I want it to be. It almost got there.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's kind of my point. Like, it would have been nice if Zero, even if the reason why she came out was because of love of her own collective and blah, blah, blah. Like, it would have been nice if she had figured that out and not someone told her.
Well, there's no evidence that you can hear anybody when they're a drone, or that a drone can hear you if you're taught like that. Your
right.
consciousness is wiped out. There's no precedent for that.
Yeah.
I guess she's a machine, and so maybe it's a little bit different.
Well, yeah, and I was gonna say, like, she's a machine, she's a cloud. Like, it's entirely possible that her makeup in general, since it's not like physically biologic, I'm not really sure.
No idea.
Yeah, but like, she clearly does not listen through eardrums.
Right. I guess the bottom line is we're gonna have to do a lot of work to make this fit in to the idea that you can be talked out of being assimilated.
Yeah.
Which isn't novel anyway. We've heard of this before. I know you can hear me in there.
Oh, right.
Like, you know what I mean? That's
yeah, that's classic.
Actually,
yeah.
Although I can't give you any example. Give me an example of that trope. Even though we know it exists 500 times.
Iron Giant.
I've never seen that.
Oh, you need to see that.
I know you just ruined the infamy too.
No, actually I didn't. But
I'm not falling for that.
Even First Contact.
Oh, Data?
Yeah.
Yeah, although Data was never assimilated.
Right.
I guess.
Yeah.
But you're right. He did wonder. He almost took the deal.
Right.
Data did.
Yeah.
He should have taken the deal.
Missed out.
I know. Right. Yeah, and Janeway has quite a history with the Borg. The Borg should be pretty pissed at Janeway, actually.
Well, and if they do still like have kind of the knowledge of timelines, like they kind of showed with Picard, then they should be exceptionally pissed because of what she did to them in the future.
What does she do to them in the future?
Just in the last episode, Endgame, like she provides some kind of virus that makes the Borg not attack, so Voyager can get home.
Oh, that's in the past. Janeway from the future comes back.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, then, yeah.
Yeah, so they should be super pissed at Janeway. I mean, I guess they never see Janeway. Then maybe that's why Janeway doesn't offer to come with them. It's like, no, we have a bad history.
Well, that's a name I haven't heard since I chopped your father's limbs off and left him by a lava.
That's true.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so not a proper Star Trek episode then.
Nah.
Okay. Well, maybe next week it'll be different.
Right.
But probably not. Probably won't be.
Well, I was gonna say time will tell.
Good callback to something nobody heard. I do like that it's in the same way that Lower Decks is. They are doing their Star Trek homework.
Okay.
It does seem like they're not just kind of taking the superficial Star Trek stuff and saying that's enough. You know, they're referencing things.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
All right. I mean, but is there any show so far that we've watched that's new that hasn't done that kind of deep dive?
I was expecting this show to be very light on Star Trek lore.
Oh, okay.
Just because it's for kids.
Right.
And how much, like, kind of the same conversation we had last episode, which is, who is this show for? Mm-hmm. Why go through all of the trouble of making it a Star Trek show if it's for children who probably haven't seen Voyager or any other Star Trek?
Right.
If the idea is to introduce them to Star Trek by putting in a reference show, you know? I guess that's all Star Trek now, though, is everything references everything. And so there's no show that won't be referencing anything. So it's almost like you can enter anywhere. And this is a good entry point.
Yeah. But I mean, going back to that comment, like it's still a kid's show and they introduce the Borg, but they don't do anything with the Borg. And so like kids don't understand why they're scary. And for the adults, they don't really do anything with the Borg. So it's like, you know, the Borg are not a threat in this episode, other than the Borg are scary.
Right. But you said that there are Voyager fans watching this.
Yes.
I believe you.
Yeah.
I'm one of them.
Right. Proof positive. There you go.
And you are not. Because you are not a Voyager fan.
Yes. Now that I'm not watching this, because I actually have been watching this.
No, but you're not a Voyager fan.
Right.
Or would you call yourself a Voyager fan?
I'd call myself a Star Trek fan, and yes, like I am willing to watch through Voyager. But if I were to pick my two favorite series of classic Trek, not of the resurgence, I would, because of our podcast, I would actually do Next Generation and Enterprise.
Yeah, I'm probably with you.
Okay.
I don't know if I like Enterprise better than Voyager, though.
Right. That's fair.
I just don't know.
Right. I don't think we're through enough. And I realized today or yesterday that we are going to watch this until the end of January, which I'm pretty sure that's when another Star Trek series is going to start up again. So,
well, we're supposed to be watching Discovery.
Yeah. I know. Maybe if there's an interim between Prodigy and whatever new series comes out, we will have an episode devoted to Discovery.
Well, we're going to do Discovery. We're not going to do it episode by episode for seasons 1 through 3. Have there been 4?
There's been 4 seasons. There's a 5th one we're filming, and I'm pretty sure that every season is serial. They do not do any episodic series.
Okay, so we're going to have to do it that way. So seasons 1 through 4 are going to just be one long episode.
So we've got 10 episodes of our podcast that are based on 30-minute episodes, and then we're going to do our next episode based on 10 hours of Star Trek.
Well, people have already seen Discovery.
Right. I know.
We don't need to dive deep
Right.
in Discovery.
No, we just need to tell people whether or not it's proper Star Trek. That's what they're here for. That's what they need to know.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's only fair to make that distinguishment.
That's fair.
Over the course of the season, because just one episode is not going to cut it.
Right. Yeah.
Just like Picard.
Exactly. Which we need to decide what we're going to do with season 3, but we're not there yet.
Right.
All right. Well,
Okay.
I've been Jonathan.
Yeah. And I've been Paul.
And this has been The Measure of an Episode.
But you already knew that.
Is that going to be it every time?
Yeah, because I can't do anything else.